Welcome back to Off the Chart, Xtra's 8-part podcast devoted to the groundbreaking Showtime series, The L Word, and the LA lesbians we can't stop thinking about. With the Generation Q reboot launching soon, we're looking back, season by season, at how the show revolutionized queer women's representation, getting it wrong as often as it got it right. Yes, we are reliving the L Word, so you don't have to. And on this episode, we're processing season 4, and it's all poppy chasing, poker grifting, and lesbian basketball trash talking. I'm Rachel Giza, the editorial director at Xtra, and in the movie adaptation of our podcast about the movie adaptation of Les Girls, I'd like to be played by Cate Blanchett.
That's a great choice. I'm Erica Lenti, senior editor at Xtra, and I don't kiss girls who wear doilies.
And I'm Eternity Martis, senior editor at Xtra and future coordinator of all bisexual speed dating events.
And I'm Michelle Turingen, managing producer of video at Xtra, and I'm really starting to reconsider my love for Jenny Schechter.
Good. We were waiting for that to happen. I have to say, you're all looking very Shane today.
Oh, thank you.
So let's talk about the big themes of the season. What would you say this season was about? Erica?
Yeah, I think this is an ongoing theme through the entire series, but I think they really were pushing for us to talk about queer connectedness and community this season. You know, Alice's chart moves online finally, and so our chart is basically the entire universe of lesbians in LA. And we see, you know, Tina says that she's missing being in that lesbian community again. The entire Les Girls premise is all about lesbian community. Tasha has her fam in the military. So we're talking a lot about connectedness, community, what it means to be part of something.
Yeah. For me, I think one of the big themes was mistakes and their consequences. Angus regrets cheating on Kit. Kit falls off the wagon. Tina regrets leaving Bette for the boring guy. Bette has to face how her controlling nature has destroyed all of her romantic relationships. And Shane goes on a terrible bender at the beginning of the season after dumping Carmen, and then has to pay for her father's mistakes by taking in her little brother. Shell, what about you?
I think there's some growing up happening in season 4. You know, as you mentioned, Shane becomes her half-brother Shay's primary caregiver, and she's never really had to be responsible for anyone but herself before, so she really steps up to put him first. Of course, Helena gets cut off financially from her family's fortune, so she's never had to worry about money, and she now needs to learn how to be self-sufficient. So there's a lot of growing up yet.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of diversity this season.
Hell yeah.
So we get to see more characters of color with actual storylines. They're not just one-dimensional characters. We have Pappy, who is played by Janina Gavankar, who is a lesbian Latina Lothario of sorts. And then there's Tasha, who's played by Rollins, who is a Black lesbian in the military who's dealing with PTSD. And then we have Bette, who is starting to talk a little bit more about what it means to be a Black mother and have a biracial child. So, you know, there is diversity, and it's the conversations are kind of superficial, but they're starter conversations about the group's middle-class white privilege.
Finally,
4 seasons in.
I think they even get called bougie, right?
Oh, it's so good. Bougie. And they call themselves bougie bitches. And I'm like, guys, that wasn't the intent. You're not supposed to own this.
Okay, Les recap. Eternity, start with you and tell us what's going on with Alice in this season.
Yeah, so Alice is trying to get over Dana's death by, getting under other people. So Alice is on the hunt for this mysterious chart-topping Pappy, who she confirms is the real G of sexual encounters.
Only 20 hours after her name appeared on our chart, she has crashed our server, and she's displaced perhaps the greatest player in the history of players. Now, all I can say is Pappy. Pappy, if you are out there, if you are real, please make contact with us.
And then Alice has a tryst with Bette's boss, Phyllis, who is played by Cybill Shepherd, who is married to a man but falls really, really hard for Alice and basically stalks her life. And then Alice starts dating a very conservative Tasha, who is in the military, and Tasha is ordered by her supervisor to keep her sexuality a secret That's the whole don't ask, don't tell policy, which was instituted by the Clinton government in 1994. So Alice and Tasha spend the season fighting and fucking and loving over politics and their differing opinions on the war, which is pretty much what we're all still doing in 2019.
Yeah, it feels like, again, like in the absence of Twitter, it's interesting to think about like when the new series comes out, how this is going to be taken up. On the don't ask, don't tell front, I think this is like another interesting example about how the show brings in real life, what would have then been current issues that were being faced by folks in the queer and trans communities. As you mentioned, Eternity, this was instituted by the Clinton administration in 1994. It lasted until 2011. And the idea behind it was you could serve in the military if you were queer or trans, but you had to stay in the closet. And so you could not serve openly. And if your sexual orientation or gender identity was discovered, you could be kicked out of the army. So on the show getting more diverse in the fourth season, I want to pick up on the conversation that we started last week about casting and representation. And let's first of all talk about Pappy, who is in so many ways an amazing character to me and in a really interesting addition to the show. But I also think that there was some stereotyping, I think, in this character. What do you all think?
I loved Pappy. I wish that she had stayed for longer. And I kind of hope that she would come back in the reboot. I don't think that's going to happen. But I just loved the whole, like, she's sexually liberated.
I can make a woman come just by kissing her.
She's like the G, as you put it, of like LA lesbians. Mm-hmm. And it's so nice to see a woman of color kind of just embrace her sexuality and you know, give Shane a run for her money. I was getting a little bored of the whole Shane sleeps with everybody. Is this like Lothario? I loved Pappy this season.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as we've mentioned before, LA was full of Latinx people at the time that the show ran. So it's a bit weird because Janina Gavankar is actually of South Asian and Dutch descent. So I find it a bit strange if they couldn't cast like a Latinx character, although like her as Pappy was incredible, but it just made me kind of wonder. And same with Sarah Shahi playing Carmen, who in the show is a Mexican-American character, but Sarah Shahi is actually of Iranian and some Spanish descent.
Well, yeah, and I think like in the case of Pappy, again, I think she is an amazing character, and I think it's an amazing performance. But also, they really do lean into like a lot of particulars about like a particular kind of Latinx identity, like in terms of her hair, in terms of her clothing, in terms of how she speaks. And so there's something to me that just feels like a little uncomfortable about not casting someone from that particular community. But also at the same time, like I actually think that both those actors are really good. And why they weren't able to play like a character closer to themselves is also interesting. Like why didn't the show say we love Sarah Shahi? Why can't she play an Iranian American? Or why can't Janina Gavankar play a South Asian lesbian? I mean, I think that this is not, I think these are conversations we're having now. They still happen, but I feel like, you know, when Scarlett Johansson plays a non-white role, people are going to talk about that.
Or a tree.
Or a tree. She can play a tree. She said she can play a tree.
She's entitled to play a tree.
She can be whatever she wants.
I do like, though, that Kit was kind of like, you don't have to do this whole Pappy thing, you know? And then she's like, oh, my God, I'm in love with, like, Kit because Kit sees the real me. So, like, there is, like, that moment. It's a bit weird and a bit meta because, like, you know, Pappy really isn't, or, like, played by, like, a Latinx character. But then Kit is like, you don't have to do this whole thing. Which it seems like she's been doing her whole life as like a defense mechanism.
Yeah, and the whiteness of the friend group really comes out when Alice is trying to look for Pappy, and she's like, Pappy. And I'm like, look, like I'm super white, but like, come on, you know that it's pronounced Pappy.
It was so cringe. Worthy to watch that scene where like they're getting it on in the car, and she's like, oh, Pappy, and I'm like, this is not even cute because she's like, she can't say it. It's a well-rounded, it's Pappy.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad.
The other thing that I think was really interesting and exciting this season as the friendship group expanded, it allowed for these really fun set pieces in the directing. Do you want to talk, Shell, about some of the fun scenes we saw this season?
Absolutely, I do. One of my favorite scenes this season was certainly the phone call.
Hello. Alice, this thing with Phyllis is completely out of hand.
like a 10 or 15, 20-minute scene that involves many characters from the show having various back-to-back phone conversations, and the scene is done in split screen, and people appear and disappear from the conversation.
Already slashed my budget. It's a fucking bloodbath over here.
Phyllis on line 1.
It's all happening in real time.
Phyllis.
It's very frenetic. It's very fun. It feels different from the format of the show in general. So that was really nice to see that scene.
I need you to get her to talk to me.
It's a difficult situation, Phyllis.
The sex was incredible, stellar, earth-shattering even.
There's the scene where everyone at one point ends up in Alice's bed, and they're having like group conversations, and people pop in and out of that. So there's like lots of really interesting ensemble scenes happening.
But then there's also that basketball scene.
How could you
the
forget?
basketball
The
scene.
amazing
Yeah.
So good.
basketball scene.
Yeah, so talk about the basketball scene.
What can I say that I just love it. So the basketball scene is basically like the first time that we get to see women of color on this court. Like these are Papi's friends. Like they challenge this like group of our group of main characters. And there's so much shit talking that happens. Like Papi calls Shane like Vanilla Spice, and it's like all you guys know how to do is shop.
Nice job, Rodeo!
And they're like, we don't know how, like, that's not all we do. We don't just shop. But then they show up on the court in the most ridiculous outfits. Like
They actually got jerseys with their names.
with their names, which just shows how bougie they are, because they had money to buy uniforms and put their names on the back. And then they got smoked. And it was just such a nice like clash of like, this is real LA versus like this fictional L word LA. So it was funny. It was great.
You were telling me your favorite quote from the show, though, which is from the basketball scene.
Yes. So it's when Papi is like trying to cover Bette and is like, oh, what do you do on Rodeo Drive? And Bette's like,
Shopping, bitch.
and just like and shoot and scores. So it's a really nice scene. It's like a coming together of what I would have liked to have seen on the L word, and what was actually there.
Yeah. So let's go from the playfulness to the brooding. And let's talk about Jenny. And I know, Erica, you have so many feelings about Jenny in this season.
I do. I wouldn't say brooding. I would just say pure awfulness. So we pick up with Jenny, whose book has just come out, and she gets a bad review in Curve magazine that she's really upset about from this writer named Stacey Merkin.
And do you know what Merkin means? Vagina wig.
I mean, I don't know anyone who would get that upset over a review in Curve magazine, but Jenny goes above and beyond. She finds the writer's girlfriend, who is a vet named Lindsay, and she adopts a dog who is like old and kind of dying, and then just brings him to Lindsay's vet and like gets him put down, okay?
Rosandra. Are you sure he has to die?
Needlessly, she euthanizes the dog, which I am so angry about. It's like my least favorite Jenny moment. She tries to destroy their relationship. It all comes unraveled. But Jenny doesn't face any consequences for that, really, because she puts out a series of stories in The New Yorker, and they get optioned for film. Why are we rewarding Jenny for this? She is so awful. I don't know what happened. Like, I didn't like Jenny in the first place, but it seems like the writers just made her completely terrible. It was like a 180 switch. I don't know. What the hell, Jenny?
So Shell, is our like long-standing Jenny apologist. Like what happened? Like did like you lose all your sympathy and crush on Jenny in this season?
I mean, as awful, I'm also a dog lover, so I was not fond of that happening either. But, and like, don't at me, like, like I still like, you know, coming off of seasons 1, 2, and 3, you know, like Jenny really falls for Lindsay, and like, you know, she had a plan and play, and then
No,
I'm kidding.
That
She had
like
a plan and
manipulation.
play. And then, you know, she wasn't expecting this to happen, and
Oh
then she
my
gets her
God.
heart broken. So
Shell.
yo,
The
I said don't
euthaniz-
at me.
The scene with the euthanization, you see Jenny like make an ugly face. She's like, "Oh God, this old dog, I have to put it down." Like she has no remorse. You know Ellie's gonna listen to this.
Okay, so
Ellie is Shell's dog.
She's gonna hear you say this.
but once we start to get away from that arc of Jenny's story in this season, and she puts out her book, starts to get the movie deal, and then you see how awful she is in that environment and kind of taking on that role. That is when my love for Jenny like starts to disappear, because she just becomes like this awful human being to these people who, like, if we didn't forget, like, embraced her just a couple of years ago.
Yeah. So yes, because the book is Les Girls is based on all these characters, and they're completely like very thinly disguised. So what is it, like Bette and Tina or Bev and Nina? Yeah. And so I mean, she's not even trying to hide that these are based on these people that she has spent time with, she's gone on vacations with, she's been at their parties. But I will say, just as like devil's advocate, I think the thing that I find super interesting about Mia Kirshner's performance in this season is she is going like full nighttime soap villain. And there is something sort of fun and super juicy. Like, there's no attempt to be made that Jenny is actually sympathetic anymore. Like, she's full like Dynasty with shoulder pads, like throwing somebody into a pool kind of like soap opera bitch, which is actually kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, aside from Jenny, like that performance by Mia Kirshner is like to hate someone so much and we can still talk about it. Like, I think that like that's an incredible performance.
Yeah, Mia Kirshner, please do not be deterred by this. Please reach out to us.
We hate Jenny, but we love Mia.
Yes.
Okay, let's just quickly talk about Max.
Yeah.
Do you want to jump in, Erica, and talk a bit about Max?
Yeah, we continue this sort of very after-school special plot line for Max. He's continuing his transition. He's not really with the main group for the most part this season. He starts dating his boss's daughter. She dumps him when she finds out he's trans.
I was born a girl. And, I mean, I still kind of have, like, a woman's body. I mean, even though I am a man.
My God.
Wait, Brooke, look, I know this is a lot to
You're a
take in,
freak.
okay?
I don't date freaks.
He comes out at work to support another coworker, a female coworker, and then he ends up leaving because he's being harassed. It's just an overall sad season for Max. And as we know, it's not going to get better. So, poor Max.
Yeah. So with Bette and Tina, you know, Tina is sort of sidelined as well for a lot of the season. She's regretting that she has left Bette. She's, I think, regretting her relationship with the guy and wants to be back with Bette. She also has the unlucky job of being the producer of the movie adaptation of Jenny's book, and Jenny just is a monster towards her. More interesting, I think, by far is Bette's plot line. So she becomes the dean of the art department at the university, where her new boss, Phyllis, as mentioned, played by Cybill Shepherd, has just come out as a lesbian. Bette also falls for a visiting artist and professor named Jodi Lerner, who's played by the amazing Marlee Matlin. And what I love so much about this relationship is that Bette finally meets her match in terms of another strong-willed, powerful, formidable woman who is just not going to let Bette pull her usual shit.
I want to be in a relationship with someone who works with me.
But you want to be in a relationship with someone who works for you.
What did you guys think about the addition of Marlee Matlin in that relationship?
I loved her. She was so great. And I agree. It seems like there's finally someone worthy of Bette and vice versa. So it was really nice to see her. The one thing that's very confusing to me about their storyline, how did Bette learn sign language like overnight?
Yes.
That really bugged me.
But isn't that like so Bette that she would become like fairly competent at sign language?
It's very on point for her.
Yeah. She's very high achieving.
It was also nice to see not just that Bette had met her match, but that Bette was pining after someone.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when Jodi was, you know, talking to the other woman and Bette is just like there with her sad, sulking face and is like, you know, I can't get you out of my mind. I feel kind of jealous. Like, it was nice to kind of see Bette have to work for something like that in terms of a relationship. So I liked that.
I was really stuck when I was rewatching it. I was thinking about sort of not only how much the variation of sex the show shows, but also there was this moment with Bette and Jodi working out their relationship and can they be a couple and are they going to be non-monogamous or monogamous? And I think I was just struck again by what it means to have a show where you see two women in an intimate relationship with one another. And I think I was struck by in rewatching it how how rarely I see those stories where it's about how do you navigate a relationship between two women, where it's not a coming out story. And I feel like I wrote a piece a couple of years ago about how I was so bored by coming out stories in movies and television, because that's just a thing that happens and then you go on and you live the rest of your life. And there's something just really kind of wonderful. And I think I was just struck again by being kind of taken aback by how I never see these stories and what it means to see these two women fall in love and work it out. Okay, so let's move on to Shane. Shell, what's happening with Shane?
So after leaving Carmen at the altar, Shane goes on a brief drug bender with Sherry Jaffe, but Shane's got some big responsibilities this season. Shane's dad, Gabriel, and his ex-wife, Carla, both abandon Shane's half-brother, Shay, and it falls to Shane to look after him.
Where do you think you were going to go?
Home.
I'm your home now, okay? We both have to get used to that.
She struggles with this at first, but eventually grows to truly love him. And just as she's adjusting to kind of this role as guardian, Shane and Shay's dad, Gabriel, comes to LA to take Shay back home to Portland, Oregon. And Shane is kind of like heartbroken. Shane also meets a sexually fluid single mother, Paige, whose son Jared goes to school with Shay. They start dating. Shane tries to do the relationship thing again, but as expected, fails by having sex with a real estate agent.
Oh, Shane. There's just a couple more characters I want to make sure we talk about. We've already talked a bit about Pappy. We haven't talked much about Tasha, who also joins the show this season. Eternity, do you want to talk a bit about who Tasha is and what she means for the show?
Yeah, so Tasha is this very smart, sensible, grounded character who falls in love with Alice. She's not into drama. She's really kind of not into the chart either. So a huge contrast from the rest of the group. And Tasha served in the war, and throughout the season we see as she struggles with PTSD, but she also has very different political opinions than Alice does, and we see them clash throughout the season. But I think what's great about Tasha, beautifully played by Rose Rollins, but Tasha does not want to be an experiment for Alice or anyone. And I think the fact that we have a character like this, a Black woman who's in the military, as a main kind of character this season, I found it a bit disappointing that even in the script they had mentioned that Tasha was angry. And so Tasha's going through all this stuff, really struggling with her experience in the military, and gets reduced to being called angry. And in an interview with Rose Rollins, it actually started with Rose saying Tasha is not an angry person. Tasha's just got a lot of shit going on. And so on one hand, it was really nice to see this character in the L Word at this time, with these kind of sort of conservative right-wingish politics battling Alice. But the other hand, it was like they almost reduced her again to that kind of angry Black woman stereotype, which I was hoping we would get away from.
Totally. Black women do not get written very well on this show.
Well, let's talk about Kit then. let's do our regular check-in.
I am
Kit.
just call me Tyra Banks. I am so rooting for Kit. Kit gets cheated on this season by Angus, who, side note, it didn't seem like he didn't want to do it. Angus was very much in this and very kind of unapologetic about it. Didn't show any remorse until he was busted. But so Kit gets cheated on and then resorts back to drinking. And it's really, really sad because this is a character who's been through so much. She's a Black woman. She faces a lot of division between her family. Bette is the great kid to their father. And then she finally gets her footing. She's happy. She's in love. She gets pregnant. Then she has to have an abortion. Then she gets cheated on and then resorts back to drinking. And so it's not great for Kit. I'm not pleased about this.
No, and it also came at a time when, Kit's business is thriving. She's got a new album coming out. Things were really on the rise for Kit. And it just feels like, she got knocked down at her happiest moment.
It's true. Poor Kit.
Okay, there is so much more we could talk about, but like Bette learning how to sign I want you in order to seduce Jodi in her sculpture studio, it's time for our quickie round. This time we're talking the funniest, cringiest, and saddest moments of season 4. Shell, I'll go to you for the funniest.
I mean, obviously the basketball game, which I can't believe I forgot, but I really loved the game of charades, or guess the celebrity, at Tina and Henry's, because it basically just turns into straights versus gays.
Major Dyke. She came out big time in 2000. I mean, we already knew, but come on, big business.
Dyke.
Big business.
Sorry, guys, time's up.
Who is it?
Lily Tomlin.
Lily Tomlin is not a lesbian, is she?
And like all the gays don't know who all the straight celebrities are, and I'm gay, so I don't know who they are either. And I just love when Helena is like, desperate house, what? And the reactions to each other, I thought was really funny.
It's Terrell Owens, Shell. Get your...
Erica, what about the cringiest?
Oh God, the Angus and the other babysitter Hazel, when they start hooking up, it's just so cringy. She's so over the top. He's like teaching her how to play guitar, and he's like, you just strum up and down. She's like, I'm very good at an up and down motion. I was like, stop it. I was like scrubbing through. Awful.
She also didn't blink.
And Eternity, what about the saddest moment in season 4?
I would have to say Shane saying goodbye to Shay.
All right, well, listen, I want you to be good to yourself.
Okay.
And you know I'm always here if you need me. So don't forget that.
I actually shed a couple of tears. I found that to be really heartbreaking. And it's like one of the first times we see just like how emotional Shane really is.
She's a real sad boy.
Real sad boy.
That's it for this episode. Next time we look back at season 5 and its lesbian club wars, Les Girls movie set hijinks, and an unexpected Top Gun L-word crossover. You ask, we'll tell. I'm Rachel Giza.
I'm Eternity Martis.
I'm Michelle Turian.
And I'm Erica Lenti. Justice for Sounder before we close.
Off the Chart is produced by Corey Mesquita and Rachel Matlow, and our music is by Kid Coolit. Until next time, Mia Kirshner.
If you are out there, if you are real, please make contact with us. You can call us. You can drop us an email. Let us know where you hang out. Let us know where you hang out. Let us know where you hang out. Let us know where